Okay, guys, need your help. I want to show you the kinds of systems that I've been thinking through with the fractal productivity methodology. The methodology was created as I was trying to wrap my head around how best to plan my weeks, and I've talked about that extensively. But as the methodology formed and I started to think through the specifics of it, I realized not only is it something that outputs fractals, but it actually is itself a fractal if you kind of dive into it, and it can be applied to different arenas. So here is the example using my weekly plan that I've talked about already, so you'll be kind of familiar with it. But this four set of categories is kind of the overarching framework that's in my head. So you've got a divergent component, a convergent component, queries, and output. And the system itself is the first three, and then the output is the result, kind of the resulting fruit of doing that process, whatever it is you're aiming the process at. So in this case, it's a weekly calendar and a set of tasks. And I used to live in the divergent part, and the convergent part was simply an accessory to the divergent. So for me, I used to have a huge set of tasks and try and form a weekly plan from inside of those tasks. I would just kind of scroll through the tasks and try to come up with a set of things to do that week, which was a divergent methodology inside of a divergent component of the system. The divergent component is just this massive, all the kind of GTD input I'd had, and then I would sort in, what's a task, what's a project, what are the next actions, what's reference. And so I would organize it somewhat, but it was still a divergent component of the system. There was no cap to it. It could be 10 items long or 10,000 items long. It's whatever the funnel of information that was coming at me, which made it very kind of mentally and emotionally difficult to create a task list from inside of that I was confident in, that I would get those things done, and that I was doing the most important things. Talked about all that stuff before on other videos, but this is what I've come up with. So the divergent component of the weekly planning session that I have is all the GTD inputs, all the ubiquitous capture devices, my notes from meetings, notes of ideas. I take notes on my phone, my physical inbox, my email inbox, all of that stuff comes in at me, and I process it. So GTD information processes to lists. I won't go into detail about that. Anybody that's familiar with GTD knows that all that information is going to end up either as trash or as reference or a calendar event or a next action or project. And then I've added on to that a layer of the way I look at those things as a Scrum product backlog. I accumulate the product backlog, and that is my list of projects and tasks. That's my own personal product backlog. So that's more divergent. There's no cap other than the time I have and the amount of creativity that I have in creating ideas or accumulating ideas from books, articles, conversations, or just sitting and thinking. So that's all divergent in the sense that it's branching out, it's accumulating a ton of stuff with no cap. The convergent component of the fractal productivity weekly planning method is something it will have as the calendar specifically. My task list, in a sense, knows no constraints. It's just a list of all the stuff I could possibly do and all the projects I could possibly do. And yet, I'm bound to time, I'm bound to energy, I'm bound to focus and other resources like finances or alignment on a team or whatever. There's natural constraints in the system that the task list doesn't know about and can't deal with in a sense. So you have to have some way of accepting the natural constraints in the system, and the calendar view really captures the primary constraint, not all of them, but the primary constraint pretty consistently. What captures the rest of the constraints is story point throughput. I won't go into any detail about that, but a story point over time begins to represent all of the required resources to accomplish a particular task, including a team's focus, their energy, their time, their excitement, their alignment as a team, the synergy of two particular team members working together for a period of time is all accumulated in a story point. So the convergent component of my system is first the calendar and then the story point throughput. The way that I transact the relationship between the convergent and the divergent components of the system is represented in a set of queries that the calendar asks the task list. That's how I imagine myself kind of sitting inside of a 3D representation of the calendar, so to speak. What I'm actually looking at is Google Calendar, side by side with my task list and this set of queries. So it would look like, let me see if I can pull this up right quick so I can show you. I didn't think about this, but this would be a good way for you to see how these things interact. So literally I have my calendar template up, which looks like this, which is next week's template. So I pull that up, and there is a set of questions that I'm asking, and here is all of my task list. Here's all my possible projects, and yeah, these are all my possible projects and tasks. So the calendar here is asking this set of questions, very specific questions in a very specific order of my total task list, which represents thousands of possible tasks that I could be doing. But it asks it in a very specific order, and the questions are created in order to make it pretty easy to answer. All right, so get rid of that. Not that. So again, the calendar is asking the task list this set of queries, and this is the set of queries that I ask. And then after that is some more that gets more in the creative realm for me, but I didn't add those onto here. And then in the system, there's an output. There's a margin-rich calendar time filled with calendar time chunks. Excuse me, there's a calendar filled with margin-rich time chunks. There's a task list that's rich in margin, in the sense that with the resources I most likely will have each week, I am well able to do the tasks that I add to the list. Urgent and important things are getting done. Non-urgent and important things are getting focused on, and then there's also time for other miscellaneous tasks and interest around the margins. And confidence, that's one of the big outputs of this system for me personally, as opposed to what I've done for years. When I would get done my weekly plan, I would essentially think, well, I know I'm not going to get all that stuff done, but I don't know what to do about it, so might as well just quit planning and go do something. And then I would get half of the stuff done, leaving some of the important stuff undone. So this system for me has created confidence, and it's left time for doing non-urgent, non-important things that used to absorb a lot of my time and attention because I didn't really trust the system, so I might as well do what I felt like doing. Now I trust the system, and yet there's still time. Like I like scrolling TikTok, listening to Gary Vee and these actors who post these TikToks, whatever. That used to absorb more of my time. Now that I understand the system, I still do some of that, but it works its way in around the edges instead of imposing itself on time chunks. Okay, so that's one instance of of this fractal productivity system. So that's kind of, I'm just showing you what I'm talking about, an example of it. Here are the underlying first principles. Divergent component in the system is open-ended. There's no cap. It's sorted enough for easy reference. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's oriented towards exploration and discovery. It's expansive. It's branching out. There's no natural constraints imposed other than the time I have to accumulate the knowledge or the ideas. A convergent component in a fractal system identifies the key constraints in the process. It's oriented towards clarity. It's oriented towards goals and action, and it's moving towards simplicity and clarity towards a goal. The query component, the convergent structure asks for the convergent structure asks the divergent component of the structure for specific information. Critically important to me. I'm not just diving into the task list and wondering what I should do. I'm asking very, very specific questions in a very specific order. It's destination and pathway oriented, so it sees a clear destination and it sees a clear pathway to getting there. It's moving from most important to less important. It fits the big rocks in first and allows room for smaller rocks after that. And then the output is some kind of a snapshot view of one instance of a situation, which from all possible options available identifies confident decisions that lead to particular actions, and the output is confidence. So I just showed you what that looks like in terms of my weekly plan. There's a couple of other instances. So in teaching planning, for example, the divergent component of the planning to teach a class or an online course, or even have a conversation that has a teaching element with your child or something. The divergent component, which is some of the most fun part for me when I am teaching, is studying and taking notes, brainstorms, analogies, illustrations, formulas, mental pictures, similes, outlines, and resources, all for me in workflowy, especially now that there's images. I can just compile an enormous amount of information because that's super fun for me. And from the input, that gets synthesized into more and more and more and more branching out ideas of ways I can do it. There's a sense in which I wish that was all that I ever had to do, was just think about ideas, because I produce a tremendous amount of non-goal oriented, non-action oriented output in terms of more synthesized ideas. I just create more bubbles of thoughts in my mind. Super fun, but not tending towards a clear pathway towards teaching that. And what I used to do is I would accumulate all these notes, like 120 pages of handwritten notes or whatever, hand-typed notes. And then from inside of those notes, try and come up with a way of teaching it. And I would just kind of like wander around the hallways of my mind, or wander around the hallways of my workflowy node that contains all these notes, wondering how to best teach it, and seeing all this beautifully textured and colored concepts that I had been living with for the last several months as I prepared for the class. And then out of that, trying to extract an outline. And some people might be great at that. I am terrible at that, to the point of curled in a ball on the couch. No joke. Like when I try to do it that way, it is not helpful for me at all. But that's how I've done it, and I've taught a lot going through that process. But the beautiful thing for me is that I can continue to enjoy that part of the process that is divergent, that's just accumulating and absorbing and synthesizing information. But now I have a very clear, structured way to get from that to what I'm actually going to say and do when I'm standing in front of the class or standing in front of the camera. So that's the convergent part of a teacher planning system. That's like a fractal productivity approach, is identify the constraints. So the constraint is class time and the attention of the students. And then there's a set of of ideas. What's the one pointer idea? I personally work when I teach from this focusing outline. In fact, I'm currently inside of I'm currently inside of this right now, even as I'm talking to you. The first thing I did was I showed you an example of one of my systems, and then I'm selling you on why this is important for somebody like me, and then I'm actually currently doing it and teaching you. And as I'm talking about how you could also do it and why it might be important for somebody like me to utilize this. And then, I'll be talking about how to actually use it. So I'm currently inside of this. I'm not primarily teaching. I'm only teaching because I have a question at the end that I need answered. And I need help with because I'm struggling with it. There is, so this is my focusing outline when I teach, is show it, sell it, do it, use it. And that comes from when I years ago took a class to become certified and insured to teach whitewater kayaking on whitewater rivers. And they use this methodology, and I thought, that's fantastic. I'm going to use that forever. So they would first, instead of chatting about the DUFEC stroke and kind of talking around it, they would just first show you what a DUFEC stroke is, or show you what a C stroke is, or show you what a back deck roll is. They would just like, hey, I'm going to show you the back deck roll. They would do it, and they would show it. And then they would explain why it was important to learn the skill. Then, we're all out there in our kayaks, and they would have us doing it. And, the teachers would be going around amongst the students, helping you do it. Of course, these were all competent kayakers, but they were trying to explain how to teach this to non-competent kayakers. So they'd be going around having us do the stroke and showing us, if we're struggling, how to perfect it. And then they say, okay, let's use that. Let's go run a whitewater river. Okay, we're coming up on an eddy. You're going to use that C stroke to enter the eddy, and remember all the techniques that we talked about as you hit the eddy. So they would use that. That's what I use when I teach. And then from the remarkable Heath brothers, who have written some really amazing books, Chip and Dan Heath came up with this outline to make teaching sticky, make it simple. I struggle with that. Unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and use stories. So this is my framework, and this is how I process my framework in order to get to the one point or idea I'm trying to make. And then out of that comes a set of queries that the Convergent system asks the divergent notes I've taken. What's the best way from my divergent notes to show, so from show, sell, do, use, to show in a way that integrates success. So I go into my brainstorms looking for a way to show the one idea that I have. What's the best way to sell that integrates success? What's the best way to do that integrates success? What's the best way to use that integrates success? How can I put the whole thing together using, now that I've accumulated a framework or an outline for the class, how can I integrate it all and move things around in order to be even more simple, more unexpected, more concrete, more credible, more emotional, build more stories into it, and kind of create a kind of a plot to the whole class or set of classes. And then double check as I read down through what I finalize from that, have I made my 1 point well? And then go back in and reprocess if I need to. What's the output of the system? A clear outline with supporting materials arranged in an easily accessible way, and confidence. One more example. Is like planning my wife's birthday next January 1st. There's a divergent component, a convergent, there's a query, and an output. So in workflow, I have a previously brainstormed birthday ideas for previous birthdays, or just general ideas, or anytime she tells me she likes something, I just dump it into that node as a possible gift, a possible activity, or whatever. So I've got a gift list accumulated over time that continues to grow. There's a list of her interests and applications of her interests. So she's an artist, so different ways I could give her an art class, I could give her a gift certificate to Dick Blick or whatever. A specific request she's made, things I think she might enjoy. So that's Divergent. There can be 10 things or 100,000 things in there. There's no cap on that. And then just roughly outline to make it, by gifts, by events, by activities, by interests or whatever, to make it easy to access. The Convergent component of planning her birthday depends. I define the constraints in a sense here. Do I want to give her a week-long birthday celebration or whatever? Am I primarily planning a party or just a day spent with her family? So I just ask myself, what's the general idea here? Financially, I might want to give her a 2-week vacation to Italy with the whole family, but our finances won't support it, so I'm limited by particular resources. And then if she's made a specific request, if she said, I don't feel like a party this year, okay. So I'm identify the constraints and then come up with, so this, for example, last year, a 1-day outline in workflowy broken down by half hour. So I actually literally just, I've got a template for that, dumped it into her plan, broke it down by when we first get up, morning time, lunchtime, afternoon, evening and nighttime. So I broke it down into those, and then I queried all of these brainstorms from this Convergent. So I literally sat there with that outline and asked myself, what do I want this day to look like? So I literally thought, when I first wake up in the morning, what would I like to be true? I'd like to give her a gift first thing. Okay. All right, so that's a question. What gift do I want to give her? So then I go in with a specific question. What gift do I want to give Gracie first thing when she wakes up? And so then I go into my list of potential gifts and select one, or use that set of gifts to help me brainstorm an additional gift that I might want to give her, and decide maybe, a bag of expensive high quality coffee or something like that, and some chocolate or whatever. So I just kind of paint that day asking specific questions. What would I like to be true in this time frame? And what would I like to be true for the next time frame? Make sure it fits within the budget, what I come up with. And then the output is a set of preparation tasks, like I need to go and buy the coffee or whatever. And then a triggered release plan for the day. So literally this past birthday, I had that as a part of my hashtag in process for the day, and I would pull it up to look ahead to see, I need to go and get out the card and the gift that I wrapped, because it's that time of day that I'd planned on giving it to her. And confidence, I'm very clear on what I'm planning on doing. I feel like it's integrated with all the possible ideas, accepts the constraints of the system, and gives me a good plan. Okay. Enough about that. Here's my question. I'm trying to come up with a illustration, a way of illustrating the fractal principles of divergence, convergence, query, and output. And so I've spent some time just kind of sitting and thinking about what might that look like, and I'm not happy with the results. I don't think it clearly illustrates the fundamental principles. This here is me kind of sitting in the calendar asking questions of my task list, which has come from, kind of a GTD information funnel of some sort. There's no output yet. And I don't know, that was another attempt. Do you guys have, as you are listening to this, did you have any pictures in your mind that you thought might illustrate it? Have you seen illustrations of this kind of system that you think would capture the primary concepts? I'm not pleased. In this case, it's a calendar, but in general, when it comes to teaching, it's not necessarily a calendar. It's whatever the constraints of the system are, in a way of kind of sitting in something that captures those constraints, like a calendar, like a teaching outline, or set, a teaching structure, or for Gracie's birthday, the outline of the day by half-hour chunks. So something that captures kind of a structured, convergent component, the divergent component, and the queries, and then the output. If you guys have any ideas about that and how that might operate in a way that I can illustrate it, I would love to hear it. If you have any questions about the system as a whole, or any additional thoughts that you think might be helpful for me to consider, great. I'm still way in process on this. This is my 12-week year focus for this quarter, maybe for the rest of my life. I love it so much, but I'm really going to be focusing on, understanding the principles of the system and how they apply for somebody like me, who probably has ADHD. I've never been diagnosed, but when I read ADHD symptoms, I'm like, that all sounds really familiar. So possibly for somebody like me that's just divergent and fragmented in my thinking, and needs a way to capture that in a productive way. And maybe it's helpful for a lot of people. I don't know how extensive it can be helpful, but how extensively it can be helpful to people with different kinds of personalities and ways of thinking. But anyway, if you have some kind of way of illustrating that, if you could send me a link or sketch it out and send me a picture, that's kind of where I'm at in the process, is just trying to capture kind of a way of illustrating this that's useful, and where the picture itself kind of brings clarity immediately that I can then fill in with some of these concepts. So appreciate you guys. Hope this has been helpful, and I hope you can help me.